Starting Lineup, Uniforms, and Apparel present the WOA Senior AA Men's Hockey League podcast.
Hello once again, everybody. Andrew Rogers here for another episode of the WOAA Senior AA Men's Hockey League podcast. This is episode number 21. We're hitting 21 already. I can't believe it. It's just going crazy. It's just going good, though. And we're great to have you back with us. Thank you to Mitch Scott from Starting Lineup, Uniform and Apparel. He's our presenting sponsor, and I always like to appreciate the work he does off the hop and make sure to get that out of the way quickly. We have a great episode for the podcast coming up today. On the podcast, it's from the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives, Tim Mcnaughton. He also does a lot of work within the WOAA, so it's going to be good to get his take on a lot of things. So we'll introduce him here shortly. What I want to do now, though, is give you guys an idea of what's coming up on the podcast. The next few, we're already booking into July, so we have a lot of guests coming up. We'll take a look here just to give you a little bit of a rundown quickly. In terms of this upcoming week on Wednesday, we have Matt Getz coming in from the Tavistock Royals. That'll be on the 24th. On Friday, a couple of studs from the Minto 81s. We have Adam Kowalik and Tyler Harrison of the Minto 81s coming on Friday. Next week is a big week as well. We get into July with Canada Day. We have our Canada Day special on Wednesday, July the 1st. In terms of before that, though, next Monday, a week from today, we have Mitch Scott from Starting Lineup, Uniform and Apparel. He's going to be coming on to join the podcast with us. And then a week from Friday, we have Dave and Tyler Middleton. They're a couple of referees within the Senior AA League. They have some stuff that they want to talk about. It'll be great to have them on, and they're going to be joining us next Friday, July the 3rd. In terms of moving on the following week, we have our full week there scheduled already. Brendan Merritt comes in from the C4 Centenaires on Monday, July the 6th. We have Mark Rosick and Chris Dobinson from the Elora Rocks. They come in on Wednesday, July the 8th. And then on Friday, July the 10th, a pair of Ripley Wolves. We have defenseman Jordan Turcott and goalie Gatlin Burt. And then the following week, we have a couple more lined up guests and confirmed already. That's Curtis Ron of the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives and Bill Ryan of the Tillsonburg Thunder. We were originally supposed to have Bill on Friday, July the 3rd, but he had to cancel that because of a conflict. It'll be rescheduled then for Friday, July the 17th. So, onward and upward. Today's episode of the podcast, number 21. We've introduced at this time. He's the general manager, coach, / be-all to end-all of the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives. His name is Tim Mcnaughton. We welcome him now. Okay, folks, it's at this time that I welcome in my guest for today's episode of the podcast, episode number 21. We are pleased to be joined with the general manager of the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives, Tim Mcnaughton. Tim, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, and welcome.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Now, so you're the GM, right? That's a correct title?
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, I know that you're behind the bench some days, right?
We kind of do a little bit of everything in Milverton. I can do some GM, I can do some coaching, and there's other guys that kind of do every role together too. So, kind of a run by committee. So,
so would it be fair to say you're kind of the face of the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives then?
Well, I hope not.
Well, if anything of what you were saying to me earlier is true, I mean, hey, trust me, I've been told I have a face for radio too, but
that's right.
I digress. Yeah. You try not to bury your own self every now and then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just understand the truth.
Fair enough. Tim, first question I want to ask you. I mean, with COVID, everybody's been hit a bit differently in terms of how they had to adjust with everyday life. I mean, now it's kind of hopefully towards what appears to be light at the end of the tunnel, but who knows what could happen. Things are drastically different than the last time that, hockey was happening and everything else, and Milverton was just getting ready for their best of 7A final with Tavistock. How are things going with you? How are you doing? Are you keeping okay? What's been going on?
Yeah, we've been good here. I didn't end up being off work very much. We were only off for a couple of weeks and then we were back. A little bit strange with the kids being around the house all day, every day, not having school, and my wife's still working from home as well. So it really didn't affect us a whole lot as far as work and everything like that, just more so with the kids. So we were kind of lucky that way.
Now, I want to so that's great. I'm glad everything is good, and everybody's all right and accounted for and everything like that. Now, obviously, yeah, last time that we would have been talking senior hockey is when you would have been getting your drives ready to go for an A championship against Tavistock. Can you take me back to the day that you found out the news that the season would be suspended temporarily and then ultimately canceled?
Yeah, we were pretty torn up. Like, we were looking forward to the series against Tavistock. We thought it'd be a great series. We had a really good regular season against them. We felt like we matched up really good. And that we actually had a very good chance of taking it in the 7-game series. So the guys were pretty primed and ready to go. We've got a lot of rookies this year, so it was their first chance at playoffs, first chance at looking at some success in senior right off the bat. So a lot of guys were pretty disappointed they couldn't play it out. So as time went on, I guess it got easier, and you just started to realize it wasn't going to happen. But right off the bat, it hit pretty hard.
Did you guys, like, looking back, let's talk about the regular season first, because, your guys' record was one of very questionable record, because honestly, I felt like you guys were better than that record indicated. You guys got hosed on, I think, a lot of 1-goal games, if I recall correctly, and, the record was pretty, paltry in comparison. However, you guys go into Elora and you have a great first round against Elora, or second round of that A bracket, I believe it was second round, because you guys played Shell Lake, I believe, in the first round of the A final or A bracket, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got Shell Lake in the 2 out of 3, and then drew Elora, who had one of the buys there with Tavistock.
That's right. So take me through the season. I mean, what did you find from the season that translated into some good playoff success?
Well, I think you were right when you said the team seemed like they were better than the record, and there's a few guys that have been around Milverton a long time now that say that's a pretty standard thing in Milverton, that they always feel like they're a little bit better than they perform sometimes. But I think our issue, again, a lot of young guys, a lot of fresh faces. We went on a big stretch where we didn't win for quite a while, and you're right, a lot of 1-goal games, a lot of close games get away from us, and it made it difficult. But the guys stuck with it, and the guys stuck together, and we put in a couple of good wins right at the end of the season there, and got us in a good position and got some momentum going into the playoffs. So we knew we were good enough to be there. It was just a matter of showing it on the ice as opposed to just in our heads. So.
Did you find that, so once you guys entered into the A playoffs there and you drew Shallow Lake, a very good team in its own right, those 2 wins that you guys put together against them to move on quickly into the series against Elora, and then obviously the series against Elora was just, fireworks considering some of the high scores that I saw. Did you guys honestly feel like once playoffs hit, you were hitting a stride that, you guys weren't going to be stopped no matter who they put in front of you?
Yeah, I feel like the team kind of had that atmosphere about it, and they did that last year in Milverton as well. They kind of went in there after winning only a couple of games all year and made a great run in the playoffs and won the A championship again. So the guys that were there from previous years knew it could be done, and the rookies just didn't know any better, and you got to just run the momentum they bring with you. They just skate and skate and skate. So. And, a couple of good games against Shallow Lake, and then a couple of games early against Elora with some good scores on our part, gave them some momentum and got them some confidence, and then it was about finishing it off from there. So,
yeah. In terms of the season, you said you guys had a lot of rookies. Who impressed you the most out of the bunch, like a lot of the new kids that came in and joined the drives last year?
Boy, there's a big list. It's kind of hard to pinpoint one, but we had Curtis Ronley, we brought in from Waterloo, had a pretty good year for us. He brought some offense that we needed. Pretty good guy in the room. And then Colin Martin used to play in New Hamburg as well. Really probably came in a little underrated and under the radar, and actually had a really, really good season for us. So it's just some guys like that. We added a couple of defensemen that were really big pieces of the puzzle. Another goaltender in Tim Bester that played really well for us down the stretch too. So it was kind of a combination of everybody kind of finding their stride at the end that I think put us in the right spot.
I want to ask you about a couple of your 2 co-leading scorers from the season, Dennis Dewar and Evan Bueller. How important were those 2 to the overall success of the drives in the completed season, like playoffs and regular season?
Oh, Dewey's, if you've been around this league for any more than about 6 days, you know Dewey. And he's been around forever, and he just keeps doing the same thing over and over again every year. He's got a C on his chest, and he leads by example on the ice. So I don't think it matters how old he's going to get. He's going to lead the team in scoring every year. He's just that kind of guy who's going to put up points. Bueller, I would say, is probably one of the best kept secrets in the league.
Oh yeah.
My years in the league were not with Milverton. I wouldn't have told you who he was, and just watching him this year, what he can do on the ice and with the puck and the scoring touch is pretty great. And surround him with good players, and he'll be a really good player in this league.
Right on. Next player I want to ask you about is Andrew Brubaker on defense. There, he led your defensive core in scoring. I saw him play when we played you guys, the 81s, and he's just so outstanding back there on the blue line. How important is he to keeping the game intact? Like how important is he to the overall of the Drive's success?
Well, one of the best things about Brew is he's very mobile back there. Like, he controls his own end well, and he moves the puck really well. He can rush. He can be in the play. He makes it back. When he's skating at full tilt that night, he pretty much covers a lot of the ice. He'll put up lots of points from the back end, and if you've got the right Brew that night, he'll keep it out of his own net too. So when he's there and he's on, man, he's pretty good to have on your back end.
Right on. And then the last players I want to talk to you about are your goaltending tandem of Bester and BesterBruce. Those two guys logged split games this year. Again, when it comes to this league, some teams are forced to ride one and they kind of falter. Other teams, they have a nice little tandem there, or even a trio, and can be very successful. How did that apply to Milverton this past year?
Again, early in my years in this league, I learned that goaltending is super, super important. I mean, that can be said in any league, I guess, but in our league more so. If you have a very short schedule, if you don't have trust in the guys in net, then you give up a couple games, that could be your season right there. So those two guys did a good job for us. Brucey, I didn't know a whole lot about before coming into the season. He really impressed me. He's kind of a big body, gets in front of the puck well, controls the puck well. And then Timmy, we kind of got on a whim. We were short a goaltender, and we just kind of sent some messages around and pulled him out of retirement and brought him in, and took him a couple of games and a couple of practices to get his wind back under him. But when he did, I mean, he played really well for us. The two of them are opposite styles. Brucey's kind of tall and lanky and covers net, and then Timmy's kind of small and agile and moves around a whole lot. So yeah, it's kind of hard as a coach. Not knowing what you're going to get that day, which one you got to use, but yeah, they both played very, very well for us down the stretch and kept us in some games we probably shouldn't have been in.
Perfect. Now, one thing that I often hear echoed on this podcast, at least when talking to players, they often talk about numbers and how critical it is that that numbers show up on any given practice night or game night. How did that affect Milverton? Like, did you find that numbers were an issue, or did you find that you were often struggling getting guys to commit? Did that really affect you guys very much?
That's been a problem in this league for ever and ever and ever, as long as I've been around, and long before that, I'm sure. So every team's experienced it at one point in time. I think we had a short run there around Christmas where we struggled a bit to get real full lineups, but actually for the most part we were pretty good this year with our numbers. Obviously, you want the right guys there every night, and there's certain guys that you hope you don't miss, but not always perfect. But as far as the numbers go, like I said, I don't think it affected us too bad this year.
But at the end of the day, you would agree with me that, having those numbers and having that commitment is so crucial to a team's success in this league.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's some of the best teams in this league. I think that's what you'll see a lot of it is sometimes it's not even as much of a talent increase as much as a commitment increase. If you get the right 20 guys there every night of the week, you're going to mesh together and play together well, and you're going to win hockey games.
Speak a bit to me about practices, because I know that sometimes, like especially in this league, it can be something that's like a ho-hum idea where it's like, there are, allegedly teams out there that don't even practice. I find that baffling, but that's beside the point. When it comes to a practice, though, I mean, how critical is it when it comes to actually having, like, when it comes to things like team chemistry, team unity, like, and having not only that, but a good, decent practice, and not just having 5 or 6 guys show up for a little skate or like a little scrimmage. Like, what is the difference there?
Again, that's something I think been a problem in this league for years and years and years and years and years, is teams don't practice that well. I mean, it's tough to get everybody there. You got guys that have school classes, guys that work, guys that have families. It's a working man's league, and it's tough to get everybody kind of on the same page a lot of the time. So,
sure.
And then you're going to get the odd guy that just doesn't like to come to practice, and
of course
that's how it is. So,
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It's a huge part of your team chemistry, your team bonding, and your play on the ice. Obviously, the more you skate together, the more you work together, the better you work together. So,
sure.
Practice plays, practice setups, everything like that. So it is an issue, and it was an issue for us this year too. Absolutely, it was, just like any team.
Right.
To get full commitment every week. I know a lot of teams have gone to just every other week, just to try to get a little bit more commitment of guys.
Right.
Everybody has kind of their own ideas of how to run it to try and make it work, and those will be the successful ones that do that.
Now you also do stuff for the league in general. You're not just with the drives, right? Like, I know you run the website, right?
Yeah, I kind of got handed into that last year. As league meetings went on, we had this idea that we should do more stuff as a league that made us kind of look all the same, and everybody, have the same kind of websites, have the same kind of accessibility to the teams and to the rosters and to the stats and stuff. So I kind of got handed that tray as to make it all come together, and then I got left with the tray to make it run all year too. So not something I was looking forward to, but something we got done. So.
Yeah, well, hey, I like, speaking personally, I appreciated all the work that you did, because your work really translated well to my content, and a lot of the guys were really appreciative of the stuff that I was doing, and that couldn't have happened without you. So personally, on a personal standpoint, I want to thank you for that, obviously, because that was huge. But like, when it comes to this league, I mean, you've been around this league for a long time now, right?
Yeah, I think I'm at 8 or 9 years now.
In the time that you've been here, the league's changed a lot since you started. I mean, there's no question about it. It's a young man's game now. What's the biggest difference that you've noticed?
I think the talent level just keeps getting better and better every year. And crazy enough, even when I came into the league, I hadn't been around the league for a long time. And the level of talent that it was, even when I came in, I didn't expect. And it's gotten even better since then. Couple that with some really good organizations and some really good management and stuff, and there's a really, really good league here that needs a lot more exposure. And that's kind of what the theory was this year with the websites and then working into some social media, and the podcast is doing a great job of that.
Thanks.
Just getting some exposure into the league, because there's lots of players that don't live that far away from teams that have no idea the league exists.
Well, and that's my biggest thing, Tim, is that that there's so many people that are missing out on what is such a great league, and I think we could both agree on that. The fact is that this league is so good, and not only that, but there's a younger generation coming in. Not to mention, where there's a younger generation, there's a younger fan base. This league has been great, don't get me wrong, in terms of having all the old faithful, everybody who follows these teams around, because that's all they've known how to do in the last 20 years or however long. But there's a younger generation that we need to adhere to as well. And I think with the podcast, I'm hoping that accomplishes that. And I hope with increased social media from all the teams will help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we need. And you're right. The exposure is the big part. Everybody in the area here knows what the GOJHL is. We know what, the Junior C is. We know what Junior A is. But nobody knows what Senior A is.
No.
And that's on us to make sure everybody knows. Like I said, we've all recruited players for our teams that live half an hour from your hockey team and go, what league? What league is that?
Right.
And if you put any of our teams against even some of the better junior teams in the area, they're going to compete all day long.
No question about it. And like I say, you speak to the talent level in this league now. They're all coming from those leagues.
Yeah, and that's on the backs of the guys who recruit them. It absolutely is. You got players who know players that bring in players, and you got guys who volunteer for teams that make phone calls all summer to make sure they get players.
Now,
And, that's the best advertising we can get is when guys know guys.
of course, word of mouth is always the best advertising. That just goes back to advertising 101. Now, when it comes to like the team success from a franchise perspective, I mean, you could speak to this. Like, when it comes down to it, what makes a successful organization run? What are the key components?
I think a big piece that's hard to find with a lot of organizations is the behind-the-scenes stuff. I mean, you need people that are going to run the advertising and run the fundraising, and the people that run the table at the door collecting money, the people that run the bar. Little things like that are really hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And if a team has a really good organization behind it, they'll be successful. People running the money part, people running everything like that. And then you really need some active coaching and managing in to keep your roster fresh and replace guys who are going to retire, and make sure you have a full roster and you're gaining talent every year. I think if you couple those things together, you'll be successful.
Yeah. No, I would agree on that. In terms of like, so let's shift gears here, because obviously a lot of uncertainty is about next season and whether or not it's going to even happen in general, whether it's going to be a shortened season. I mean, I don't think this league survives with no fans, but that's just my personal opinion. Are you hearing anything? Like, what is the latest that you've heard in terms of this summer and how things are going to play out heading into potentially next season?
To be honest, it's been very quiet. And I think there's probably a waiting game going on with everybody, kind of waiting to see what Hockey Canada and obviously the government agencies will allow and don't allow to happen. I know from our league standpoint, all that's kind of happened so far is the meeting that would happen in June has now been put off into August sometime.
Okay.
Again, probably just buying some time to see what the next step is.
Right.
I would agree that nobody wants to run this thing without fans. Fans are a big part of it,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, for not only the support of the players, but the financial support of the hockey team as well. So nobody really wants to do that.
Right.
Hopefully we're not going down that street, but we just don't know at this point in time what we're going to be allowed to do and not allowed to do.
Like from a personal standpoint, what do you feel is going to happen?
I honestly haven't got a clue, Andrew. I can go either way. I really love to have the hockey back to normal by fall, and that's what I would like to see happen.
Right.
I'm afraid it might not be, so whether we end up with a shortened type season, with a little more restriction on things,
right.
I could see that as kind of a way to do things, but I really don't know what they're going to do yet.
Fair enough. No, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I would be absolutely heartbroken and crushed as well if this season didn't end up coming to fruition, because, like, it's one thing when you have a season that gets completed and everything gets resolved from seasons past, but it's another thing when it gets cut short of crowning any winners and having those 6 teams go in with unfinished business. I mean, 6 out of the 14, that's almost, like, I mean, that's a significant chunk, and to have those teams with extra fire, you want to see them come out of the gate with a lot of intensity, and you want to see how the other teams in the league are going to respond to that. It's just so many good storylines that you don't want to miss out on.
Yeah, I mean, those series, whether they ever get finished or not, in the players' minds, those series are going to continue into the regular season.
100%.
Right? It's not a fact of whether we get to play for the trophy. It's we're going to finish these games, and these games mean something now just for the pride of it all. So,
of course. Now, Tim, you speak of, so when it comes to bringing people in, when it comes to bringing in these new talent and recruiting, like, if you had to put a sales pitch together on why someone would want to come and join, not just the Senior A League, but what if somebody wanted to come in and join the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives? What would you say to them?
You just kind of got to sell the idea of wanting to play competitive hockey again. I mean, if you're done junior, your options are men's league, where you kind of lose that competitive edge a little bit some days.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of sell the idea of competitive hockey again. You really rely on the players to be your closing things on these things. So I mean, you got players that know players who know players, and even if they don't know them personally, played against them or played with them, their brother, or have a connection somewhere like that really attracts the guys.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get the guys out, if you've got a good group of guys on the bench and a good group of guys in the dressing room, that sells itself. Everybody wants to be around a good group of guys.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that 100%. I mean, this league is just so good, and at the end of the day, I just want, I just want people to know about what's going on and just be able to, appreciate that and everything else. So Tim, I guess, what's next? Like you say, you got this meeting in August. Is that just kind of where we're at? Is a wait and see game then at the end of the day?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's not guaranteed the meeting will even be in August. It's been put off till then as a kind of a pushback to say, okay, we can't do it now. Let's aim for here, and we'll see what's opened up by then and what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Again, I think there's a lot of wait and see, even in the league standpoint, from the higher governing bodies of hockey in Canada,
right,
to see kind of what they're going to do and what they'll allow us to do. As far as the teams go, any teams I've talked to are running pretty status quo. I mean,
yeah.
It's the time of year that we kind of work on players and just getting ready for next season. So
sure.
I would say anybody who should be doing that stuff should be doing it now anyways, preparing as if we're going to start normally.
Of course.
And if someone tells us we can't, we have to double back then.
Of course. And so then the last question I have for you, Tim, before I let you go here, one interesting change in the last season was this rule change about players to try and make it a more competitively balanced league, and I think it did just that. I would say that this past season was one of the most competitively balanced seasons ever in the entirety of the WOA Senior AA Men's Hockey League. Would you agree with that sentiment?
As for my time in the league, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't seen in my time standings that close or games that good. Even games from kind of top team to bottom team were really, really competitive hockey games. The other side of it that it really, really helped with that we talked about earlier was filling out your roster every night.
Right. With
more access to players, you can make sure you have bodies there every night and that your lineup is full as well. And that's a big part to not only running a good hockey team, but those competitive games as well. You're not getting quite as many games where teams are coming in with 8, 9, 10 guys and getting blown out of the water that night.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that I think at the end of the day, if you don't get very many numbers on either side, it's not a very fun night to be at the building that night anyways. But I get what you're saying, 100%. Tim, I want to say thank you for coming on to the podcast today and being a part of it. It's been great talking with you. You do a lot of great things with this league, and I am honestly very appreciative of the work that you put in to make the product as great as it is, and as great a product as as myself and all the players can appreciate. So thank you very much for the job you do, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate you letting me come on and try to say my piece. So.
All right. So once again, I want to say thank you to Tim Mcnaughton for joining us here today on the podcast from the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives on episode number 21 of the WOA Senior AA Men's Hockey League podcast. As mentioned earlier, upcoming this week, it's a great week. We have Matt Getz coming in on Wednesday from the Tavistock Royals, and then on Friday we have Adam Kowalik and Tyler Harrison of the Minto 81s. They are coming this way on Friday on the podcast. I want to thank Mitch Scott of Starting Lineup Uniform and Apparel. I want to thank Tim Scott for coming on from the Milverton Four-Wheel Drives, and I want to thank you, the viewer, for watching once again the WOAA Senior AA Men's Hockey Podcast. I'm Andrew Rogers, the host, saying so long, and we will see you on Wednesday.